Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Appreciate you joining me here again for another week. Before I get into today's podcast, I've got a couple of favors to ask you. Please make sure that you are subscribed on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. The podcast is on all the big platforms, so Apple, Spotify, Google, etc., etc. So by you jumping on, making sure you're subscribed, you'll firstly be notified whenever I drop a new episode, which is generally every week, and also it will help me get this podcast out to more people. While you're there, if you're able to leave us a 5-star review, and please make sure that you share it around with anybody who you think might get some value out of what it is that I am doing here. To those of you that have listened for a while now, I appreciate each and every single one of you. The growth that the podcast continues to see is just phenomenal, and I'm continually blown away by your support and your efforts to help me continue to grow this podcast. So thank you for that, and hopefully I can continue to provide you with some value as we tick along in these coming weeks and in these coming years. Now, this week I wanted to talk about back to the topic of change and making change within your life, because I see a lot of, I'm coming across a lot of people and talking to a lot of people who they're just struggling to get going in something that they want to change, whether it be around their training, whether it be around their health, whether it be around just a certain action, habit, or behavior within their life that they want to look to implement something new. And a very common discussion that I am having with these people, whether it's someone who's fallen off the wagon and they want to get back on it, or it's just somebody who is looking to make like a wholesale change in one area or one aspect of their life, is we've got to have a look at what the low-hanging fruit is. And what I mean by that is, what is going to be the simplest task or the simplest thing that you can address that is going to give you the biggest result? And sometimes it's hard to see the forest from the trees when we're looking at this stuff. And what I mean by that is, when you're in it, and this is a general concept that a lot of people sometimes struggle to see because they're so in their own shit that it's hard to see on a bigger level the little things that need to be done. It's hard for us to remove ourselves, step back, and look at the situation as a whole and go, oh, this one, if I just start doing this one thing, while it's not going to cure or it's not going to fix the whole thing, it's going to make a massive difference in me starting to move things in a direction that I'm going to be happy with. So that's what I mean by the concept of what's the low-hanging fruit. What is the one lever that we can pull right now that is going to give us the biggest result? And change is hard. Any change is hard, whether it be getting back into training, whether it be rehabbing from injury, whether it be trying to just starting a business or whatever the case might be. And I think a lot of us, me included, tend to overcomplicate things. We tend to look at the bigger picture and lose sight of the smaller things that need to be done in order to get the bigger picture completed. And let's look at something, if we were just looking at trying to get back into training or change a health habit, like get into a healthier routine or whatever the case might be. Some people will go straight to training. Now, I'm one of those people that think that that's actually a good place to start. I think looking to allocate an extra 3 hours a week into doing something for yourself, whether it be going to the gym, whether it be an activity you enjoy, is a good first step. And I think that when you start to, allocate that time to something else for yourself, then other things start to fall into line. But for some people, that may be a bridge too far. They may need to start really small. They may need to look for the lower hanging fruit than just going and doing something else. It might be something like, what's your water intake like? Are you getting an adequate amount of water for your size and for your particular set of circumstances? If the answer is no, then a really simple thing to make a big impact may be drink more water. It may be, what is your sleep like? Now, sleep is one thing that I've spoken about quite a bit on the podcast. I've done episodes dedicated to sleep habits and things like that. But if your sleep is not great, sometimes it's actually better off addressing the sleep area before we start adding in some form of intense physical activity. When we look at sleep, without going too far down the rabbit hole, because it is something that I've addressed a few different times, we need to look at what are the things that are within our control within that habit. So when you have young kids, waking up during the night and having to tend to them or help the partner out, the wife out, whatever the case might be, there are going to be elements within that are outside of your control. But if you're also watching TV for 2 extra hours before you go to bed, on your phone for an hour before you go to sleep, just not maximizing the time that you are able to sleep, then they are things that you can control. It might be being a bit more disciplined with the use of technology before you go to sleep, actually having a set bedtime. So if you sit down on the couch and watch, say, a Netflix show to unwind of an afternoon, I'm not going to be here to tell you not to do that. But if you're the type of person that, and I've come up across it a lot, and I get caught up in this sometimes too, where it's like, we'll start off and we'll watch one episode and that one turns into two turns into three. All of a sudden it's, 11 o'clock at night. And then if you've got to wake up early, you're not maximizing that sleep time. So from the point of view of the low-hanging fruit to look at, maybe you've got to go, you know what, I've got to have the discipline and the control, even though I might have been left on a cliffhanger in that particular episode, to turn it off and get to bed at that point, because I know that extra 2 hours of sleep is going to go a long way to helping out my overall health and the overall goal that I'm trying to work for. So there's some of the low-hanging health habits that you can look at doing, like more water, more sleep. If they're not in line, maybe adding in and you're struggling to get 3 hours of exercise, then they're really simple habits that you can start to try and implement that aren't going to impact everything else. Things like if you're looking to change your nutrition. Now, nutrition is a bit of a Pandora's box, and there are a lot of context-specific things that need to be within there, but one really simple thing that you can aim to do is like eat more protein. So eat more meats and things like that during your meal times, which may help you cut down on other things. Not saying you need to go carnivore or anything like that. Complete opposite to that, but by upping your protein intake, you may find that you are satiated for longer and you don't maybe snack as much as what you do. Again, not saying you need to forego those snacks or whatever the case might be, but what we're talking about in today's podcast is really simple, low-hanging fruit things that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. Now, all these things are there, and they're levers that we can pull that can give us a big result on the back end. And again, what I see all the time is people tend to overcomplicate it. They think they need to do, say for example, I've just listed off 3 things that you can do outside of the gym that can give you a pretty big result when it comes to your overall health, well-being, body composition, whatever your goal is. But some people get caught up and they hear that and they think they need to do all 3 at once. And the fact is, you don't need to do all 3 at once. Will you get a better result if you do? Yes, absolutely. But you may just start off by going, I'm just going to make sure I drink more water. And that may be, and the way you may go to do that to try and help you get that is if you're drinking out of this is something that I've suggested to a lot of clients. How do you consume your water? Well, I just have a glass and I fill it up when I need more water. Cool. Go out and buy yourself a decent water bottle. Go out and buy yourself a water bottle which has like a liter or more in it, right? Like from a capacity point of view, and fill that up. And you know that by the end of the day, maybe you've got to make sure that you've drank at least 2 of those full bottles. And that's easy for you to keep a track of. And when you've got it with you and next to you all the time, it's a reminder to just take a sip when you need to. And that's the first thing that you start off with. Then, once that's dialed in, then you go for the next bit of low-hanging fruit, or that next lever that you're able to pull to get a really good result, which is I'm going to try and get more sleep. I'm not going to try. I am going to get more sleep, and you're relying on that self-control then to put the remote control down, turn the TV off, and get to bed after that first episode instead of letting it turn into 2 or 3. Then, once that's bedded down, then you can move into the next thing, and so on and so on. But you don't have to do it all at once. We get very, very caught up thinking that we have to do everything all at one time. Something else that you can look at from a low-hanging fruit point of view, if you're struggling to go to the gym, maybe you start off with just walking. Maybe it is, I'm going to do 30 minutes of walking 3 times a week. And that is a good starting point. Again, I have done an episode on why walking is such a great place to start for most people, especially if you are heavily, heavily struggling to start to allocate some time for your physical activity. But again, this is just really low-hanging fruit where you don't need to then go and find 5 or 6 hours a week to get to the gym. What it's about, if you're really, really struggling to make an indent and make a change in things that you want to, we need to look at, for you and for your particular set of circumstances, what are going to be the simplest actions that we can take in order to give us the best result. So, and by doing that, what it can do is it can actually uncomplicate the whole process and take that feeling of overwhelm away that a lot of people feel when they're trying to implement change. And when you're in it and you're feeling overwhelmed by the whole process, and then it gets put in the too hard basket and you don't actually take any action at all, that's where it's really helpful to have somebody external to yourself to look at your whole set of circumstances and go, you know what, this is the thing that I need you to do. And I only need you to focus on this one thing. That is really how a good coach will operate, in my opinion, is somebody who will look at your particular set of circumstances and give you the advice based off what the low-hanging fruit is for you. What is that lever that we can pull that is going to give us the biggest bang for our buck right now? And then once that is bedded down, then they can give you an idea on what the next thing is that you should be focusing on. And that is really the idea on how you're going to implement sustainable change. Now, some of you are going to be at a point in your life where you're able to make bulk wholesale changes. You're going to be able to add in the gym, and then you're going to be able to look at your food intake. You're going to be able to get more sleep, get more water, and you're going to be able to do all those things at once. But for most people aren't, they know they want to change something. They look at all the information that's on the internet and everything that's coming at them thick and fast. They get overwhelmed by it all, thinking that this is just too much. I'm not going to be able to do this. My family time's going to suffer. My relationships are going to suffer if I really commit to all of this. And the fact is, it doesn't have to. You can sit down with somebody, and you can do this by yourself. But I know in my life, and I know in the lives of the people that I've worked with, that it's really hard to do it when it's your life. It's very hard to get objective about yourself and your particular set of circumstances. I think learning that as a skill is an important to be objective about yourself is very important. And being able to be objective about your circumstances is a very hard-learned skill that people can pick up along the way. But if you don't do it at the moment, it's not a skill that you can just turn off an on. It's something that you need to incrementally learn over time. That's how I feel about that. So if you're unable to do that right now, getting somebody to help you with it can be such a powerful game changer and actually help you to get a better result out of what you're wanting to do. But instead of we need to look at what the one thing we can do right now to give us the biggest result. And that, if we can identify one thing, one simple task that we can start on right now, then that can take away that feeling of overwhelm that a lot of people get when it comes to change, and they overcomplicate the whole process thinking that they need to do everything. And you don't need to do everything at once. And once you start understanding what's the one action, habit, or behavior I can change that's going to give me a very big return on my time investment, once you understand that process, you can then start to add other things in very quickly, in sequence very quickly. It sometimes is only a matter of weeks of doing one thing before you look to do the other. And one of my approaches I take with people, this is why I'm a big believer in going training first. If you can allocate 3 hours a week to get to the gym, or 3 hours a week to put in time for an activity that you enjoy, I actually find with a lot of people that I've worked with, the other things start to incrementally change. They maybe start to add in extra walks outside of the training time. If their food intake is subpar, or their water intake is not where it needs to be, their sleep isn't that great, those things actually start to improve as a byproduct of only focusing on that one thing. And with a lot of these habits that we're talking about, they do act synergistically. And a lot of people will find, if they just focus on the one thing, that some of the other things that they're working on will start to improve just as a byproduct of focusing on that one thing. And that's where, if you focus on doing everything, then most of the time nothing will change. So that's why it's really important to identify what that low-hanging fruit is for you, and then start chipping away at that. And the same, if we look at it on a micro level, the same can be said for training programs. When you're doing a training program, if we look at, say, a rehab program, when I do an assessment on somebody and I'm looking at where their muscular imbalances are, where their movement deficiencies are, what I'm actually looking for is, what's the thing that we need to work on right now, which is going to give us the biggest bang for our buck moving forward. I've got a client that I'm working with who has a few issues, especially around his hips and his lower back, and I've identified that there are a lot of things that we need to work on, but he has zero hip extension. So by addressing the hip extension issue, we can start to address some of his symptoms very quickly. And yes, that involves strengthening glutes and hamstrings and things like that, but I'm not trying to strengthen the glute. My main focus, the low-hanging fruit that I'm looking for, is to improve hip extension, and as a result, the symptoms that come with that particular movement deficiency are starting to alleviate his symptoms around his previous injuries, and the pain that he's getting there. So again, that's the low-hanging fruit we're looking for. We're trying to improve that one thing. And as it all works together, other things are starting to improve with that. And to finish off, just be aware that the low-hanging fruit, when I talk about that, it is not meant to be a shortcut. It's meant to be, you still need to take action on this. It's not just, I'm going to do this one thing one time and that's going to completely change my life. That's unfortunately not how life works. Unless you win lotto, which is the one thing one time that you probably win that may change your life for the good or bad, who knows. But everything else there needs to be consistent work over time for. And it is the same with this low-hanging fruit. What is the one continued action that I can take that is going to give me the biggest bang for buck? But it is an action that you need to continue to take in order to see that improvement. So if you're struggling to understand within your set of circumstances what that low-hanging fruit is, what is that lever that you can pull that is going to give you the biggest return, we can help you. I can help you out with that. You can book in a time. It's a free call. There is a link below in the show notes where you can jump on and you can book in a time for myself, and we can have a look at your set of circumstances, take a bird's eye view on your life and what you want to achieve, and go, this is the one thing that I think you need to focus on in the short term right now. Because by understanding that, you can take away any feeling of overwhelm, any feeling of that you have within yourself that you're not going to be able to implement your change, because all of a sudden you're only focusing on one thing rather than focusing on 15 or 20 different things. And by simplifying it, understanding that, it then makes it easier just to take action on one thing and focus on one thing. And from what I've seen in 15 years of coaching people through different habit changes as it pertains to their overall health and well-being, once we get it simplified to the one thing that is easier for you to take action on, everything else around that starts to change incrementally, and the results that you can see just from understanding that one thing and what the low-hanging fruit is for you, it can be such a powerful driver in order to start making that change in a positive direction that means something to you. So if you need help, feel free to reach out. You can either book in a time with the link below, or feel free to send us a message on the socials. So at The Unstoppable Dad on Instagram, The Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook. You can reach out to us on any of those platforms, and we can get you booked in for a time, have a free coaching call, and if it feels like a good fit, like we're going to be able to work together afterwards, we can have a talk about one of our paid programs there. So that is it for this week. Let me know if it's something that you've struggled with, or if it's something that you've had success with. If you know that you've gone through the process to identify what the low-hanging fruit is for you, and you've had such a big, monstrous change in your life just from being able to identify what's the first and most simple action that I can take in order to give me the best result moving forward. So take care, have a stellar week, and I will talk to you next week. Goodbye.